So we are once again in the book of Daniel. This is the last week of the book of Daniel. We've heard a few messages out here. The last one we heard together was the message with the three men called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But I also like to call them Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, because that was their Jewish names. Now we skip forward a number of years. This isn't like, later that week or the next month. This is years after that. And the empire has changed. Belshazzar, who was Nebuchadnezzar's son somehow, was in charge. And then the Medes and the Persians rose up and took over Babylon. And now this Darius is in charge. Who Darius is, there's a lot of comments and questions, but he was basically the guy who was leading the country. And so he picks three people who are going to be kind of his reporters that are over everything. And one of those three is Daniel. At this point, what it doesn't say here, it kind of talks about Daniel being old, but everything I read, Daniel's probably in his 80s at this point. Think about that. Here's this guy who is in his 80s running the country. He is you have the king and then you have Daniel and the other two guys. And so Daniel's there, and he is doing his job, doing what he's supposed to. But then something happens that I'm sure none of us could imagine would happen in politics. There are some guys who became jealous of Daniel. Oh, that never happens. It happens all the time. Why should this surprise us that there was jealousy going on? And they wanted to get him out of there. Why? Because they wanted the power, not Daniel. So they decide we have to find a reason to accuse Daniel. And so the obvious first thing they think about is his work. We got to find him where he screws up. Sure, why not? Makes sense. And so they go and they watch him and they listen to him and they critique everything he does. And then they come to the conclusion that this guy isn't doing anything wrong. Matter of fact, he's doing everything the opposite of what we do. He's doing everything right. He's being honest. He's trustworthy. He tells the truth. This guy is a politician without corruption. Yeah, wouldn't that be kind of nice? Huh? Unicorn. Yeah, here he is. They have said, we have to find something against him, and they find nothing. And so they get back together again, and they say, well, his work is nothing. What can we find about him? And here's what they thought. This guy, he's that one of those Jewish people. He worships his God, not the God we worship. Maybe if we make it so that he can't, he might do it, and then we can get him. So they go to the king, go to Darius. Now, here's a thing that a lot of people don't know about with the Persians, the Medes and the Persians. They don't care what God you worship. They think all gods are valid. That sounds like some people today. All gods are valid. But they didn't care. They weren't concerned about who you worshiped, just that your worship led you to be a good citizen. And so Darius, they come to Darius, and what they're not thinking is, we're not going to make Darius the god. What we want Darius to be is like the priest. This whole law that Darius passed wasn't about worshiping him. It was about bringing your prayers to him, and then he would take them to the gods as a priest. It didn't matter what God. He didn't care. He was all for gods. He would take them whatever God you named, and he would take the prayers there. Because, Darius is the king. See, this wasn't about Darius being God. This was about Darius being in charge. It was about his ego. He wants to be the one that everybody puts their allegiance to. And this is a way to do it. And they say, do this, knowing Daniel will never do this. And so finally he writes the decree. And their plan is to force Daniel to show where his allegiance was. So the decree is made, and the allegiance status is put in place, and now Daniel has a decision. See, what I like about these verses, Daniel has a decision, but if you notice, Daniel doesn't say one word. Daniel doesn't say a word about, to complain about it, to make an argument about it. All Daniel does is this. He hears the decree, and he goes to his upper room, and there's a window that points to Jerusalem. And this isn't something new. This isn't something he just started. It says every day Daniel prays 3 times, and he does it in this way. He gets down on his knees. Can I tell you, prayers in those days, no one got on their knees. They just didn't do that. But Daniel does. And if you get on your knees, it is a sign that you are in desperate need of God. And Daniel doesn't do it in a closed room. Daniel goes up to the room he always goes to. He points to Jerusalem, not because there's a temple there, but because he knows that's the direction that we came from, and God is still with us, and God is still there. And he gets on his knees, and what Daniel prays for is help and deliverance. I like that. That's a good thing. He knows what's going on. He knows they're watching him. He knows probably right across the road there are guys sitting there just waiting for him to do something, and he doesn't. He gets on his knees and he prays. And the guys say, "Ha! We got him. This exile from Judah, we got him." You see, Daniel was forced to decide whether his ultimate loyalty will be to his God or to the king. Whether it's to his calling to be a follower of God or his career. Whether it's to his faith or to the flag, the country. You see, this reminded me of, I was reading this in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. There's a part in there where they ask Jesus about paying taxes. And they get on him, and they're thinking we're going to trap him. And you know what he says? You see this coin? Whose picture's on it? And they said, well, Caesar's. And he goes, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God the things that are God's. And I read this, and I think that's exactly what Daniel did. It wasn't that Darius was trying to trap Daniel. Darius thought he was doing a good thing. But Daniel said, my faith doesn't belong to anyone but the Lord, my God. So here, Daniel has prayed, and now it comes to Darius' attention. Now Nebuchadnezzar, when you had the 3 guys, we had Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, he got angry that they wouldn't bow down and worship this big, huge idol because, it was his idol. Darius, on the other hand, realizes what happened, and he can do nothing about it. And he becomes not just upset, but grieved. He likes Daniel. He wants Daniel a part of his government. Matter of fact, he had ideas of making Daniel his number 2. But he heard this happen, and there is nothing he can do. And it says he tried the whole day to figure out how can I make it so I don't have to put Daniel in that lion's den. And there was nothing he could do. And so Daniel gets put in the lion's den. And what does Darius do? He doesn't eat. He doesn't do what he normally does, which is have people over and entertainment. He says, I don't want any of that. He prayed. Now, we could probably say he prayed to any number of gods. It doesn't say exactly who he prayed to, but he knew Daniel. And he had heard about Daniel's God. You know, my guess is who Darius prayed to? The Lord, Daniel's God. Saying, you got to deliver this guy. You got to help him. You have to save him. You have to do this because he is such a good person. And I've been tricked. But he didn't give up on you. He's a good man. A righteous man. And so, Daniel's in the lion's den, and Darius is praying, and Darius is grieving. Probably didn't get much sleep. Well, the next morning, the sun starts to come up. And Darius runs to that den. And it says he cried out in a loud voice. But let me tell you what it literally means, because this, I think, is more powerful. He didn't just cry out in a loud voice. What it literally means in the Greek is this. He cried out with a painful cry. See, Darius was hoping Daniel was alive, but he thought this guy's dead. He is hoping beyond hope, and he is crying out, Daniel, Daniel, I need you to be alive, knowing that the chances of that are very, very slim, if at all. And all of a sudden he hears Daniel say, I'm okay. Can you get me out of here? I know it doesn't literally say that, but that's kind of what he says. Hey, I'm okay. Get me out of here, please, because I'm done. And they bring out Daniel, and not only was he alive, but he had never been touched. Nothing had touched him. Those lions, none of the claws got him, no bites, nothing. And Darius is absolutely amazed. You see, what I read this, what I realize, and what I want you to realize is this. Daniel's allegiance to God did not make him disloyal to the king. Folks, I have been talking about allegiance to God. About we are citizens of the kingdom of heaven. And we are here on earth and we live in tents. Yes, we are technically citizens, but it is not our citizenship. What I'm saying is this. You can have all the allegiance to God and be a great person, a great citizen, someone who follows the laws and does what they're supposed to do to live in our country, to live in our world. Why? Because we give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. Now, I'm not saying we live in the Roman Empire, but what I'm saying is this. You pay your taxes? Good, you're supposed to. You follow the laws? Good, you're supposed to. Are you loyal to being that citizen we're called to be? Good, you're supposed to, but ultimately, all that pales in comparison to our allegiance to God. That is the point here. Believing God didn't make him disloyal. In fact, it made Daniel exactly what the king needed. And what did the king need? A good, strong, godly leader. There's a reason he wanted Daniel as his number 2. He could trust him. He had confidence in him. And he knew Daniel wasn't going to do anything to try to take the power because Daniel didn't care. And why is it that way? Why can he do all that with Daniel? Because Daniel, I love this, Daniel would rather be eaten by a lion than stop praying and worshiping God. That's it. He would rather go in that den and just be devoured than say, I'll listen, I won't pray and worship my God. I love that. That's what we're called to do. We don't live in a time now where that happens. Ladies and gentlemen, my fear is it may come to that point. But you know what? That's happening around the world right now. There are countries where it's illegal to be a Christian. And you know what people are doing today? They're gathering. They're gathering to worship God. It's happening. Why? Because they would rather give up their lives than to stop worshiping and praying to God. My question to you is that you? Would you rather stop praying and worshiping God so you can say, I'm a good citizen? Or would you say, I'm never going to stop? He's my God. He's my King. He is my Lord. You see, Daniel showed that God is not distant, but that God is near. That God does not hide, but God reveals himself, even in the midst when God is not wanted. And it is the faithful people of God who reveal the faithful God. Did you hear that? We believe in something called prevenient grace. As Wesleyans and Nazarenes, what we believe is this: God is already working in lives of people who don't even know him, or don't even want him, or don't even care about him. That God is working in their lives. You know how they find out more? By the faithful people of God revealing the faithful God. That's what Daniel was doing. He is a faithful person of God, and he was revealing the faithfulness of his God. Darius defined God based on how he saw Daniel living. And if you read at the end of that chapter, Darius is talking about how great God is, how amazing God is, and how everybody needs to know about this God. But it started with Daniel. Daniel having faith. What he saw in Daniel was a God that is living, eternal, saving, and a miracle worker. Now, how these are defined, I borrowed this from a Nazarene pastor at Mid-American Nazarene. His name is Jim Edlin. And I borrowed this from him because it hit me square in the face. And I said, we need this. Our God is a living, eternal, saving, miracle-working God. And we need to reveal that. So, the living God. How did Daniel reveal the living God? Folks, if you don't believe God is a living God, if what Daniel went through happened, do you think if Daniel didn't believe that God was real and God was living, that he would have even stopped to get on his knees at any point? If he thought, well, I'm just not sure. I've been here so long, there are so many other gods, that he would have sacrificed his life to pray to God? No. If you're not sure of something, and someone says it's either this or this, you're like, I don't know if I'm sure about this, so I'm going to go over here. Our living God was there for Daniel because Daniel believed he was alive and moving and working. And here's when I read this for us. I don't care where you're at in your life. I look what's happening in our country, world, but even in our country today. You know what people need to see from us about our living God? Compassion, grace, mercy, and love. If we can reveal that about God, that's a revelation of the living God. Revelation of an eternal God. Well, let's face it, Daniel was unharmed. Daniel was allowed to live. If Daniel is living and unharmed, and even though the Jewish people are basically in a form of slavery, but Daniel lived, maybe that kingdom of their God hasn't died, wasn't defeated, is still going and active. There are people who believe that they don't believe in God, but they say God is dead because what is taught in the Bible doesn't matter. Folks, do we believe that God is eternal? Do we believe his kingdom is forever? Then live like it. Go out. And I'm not saying don't wear these. But don't be afraid. I have heard people who are my age and younger who fear everything going on. And I want to say, why? You go to church. Jesus said, don't be afraid. Just believe. Yes, we can be smart. We can wear the masks. We can maintain distance, but it doesn't mean we're afraid. It means we believe that the eternal God is with us, and that the eternal God is calling us to be stewards, and that the eternal God is a saving God. Daniel came out of that pit. We all know not that everybody doesn't live. But we also heard that some people live. Some people live. They are rejoicing in paradise. He is a saving God. You know what hearing about a saving God means? It doesn't mean going and saying you are horrible and you need to get saved. It means going out and saying, hey, I want to tell you about my saving God. What my God has done for me and for people I know. And what I believe in this saving God. The saving, miracle-working God who shut the mouths of lions and is still doing the same thing today. We get too angry as Christians. I don't know why. You know who Jesus got angry at? The leaders who said stupid stuff. But we get angry at the people who don't believe and aren't part of the church. We don't get angry at the leaders who say stupid stuff. You know who I get angry at anymore, I find myself? Is leaders who say stupid stuff. I try not to say a lot. But there are times when I say, you are wrong. And I have said that to leaders who have said stupid stuff. Why? Our God is a living, eternal, saving, miracle-working God. Shouldn't we be celebrating? That doesn't lead to anger. That leads to hope, to life, to salvation. And if you are a faithful person, we are to reveal the faithful God. It was through Daniel's life, belief, and faith that Darius saw the power of the Lord. It was through Daniel's actions, not his words, his actions, that Darius ended up lifting up the Lord. And folks, it is the same for us. Yes, there are times when we need to use words. But if our lives do not match our words, no one will listen. If we believe in an eternal, saving, miracle-working, living, loving God, and our lives don't show it, no wonder no one wants to be with that God. There's enough hate in this world. They don't need a hating God. They don't need an angry God. There's enough of that. We need to show the God who we believe is the God of love. And those 4 words I used, saving, eternal, miracle working, living, that's part of God's love. And if we're not showing the love of God, we have missed the point. We need to reveal the love of God. And through our lives, we need to show that Jesus is Lord. And if we are not doing that, no one is going to want to know him. That's what Daniel did. Daniel would rather worship than worry about the lions. I would rather worship than worry about the stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, I grew up loving Daniel Elijah. Why? Because of Daniel. I was Daniel. But I have learned so much more that I love this story, not because his name is Daniel, but because his life pointed to God. That's what I want us to do. Our lives point to God who is love and to Jesus who is Lord. May that be